A ballistic missile struck the headquarters of the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet today. Bahrain confirmed the attack within hours. The Pentagon issued a formal statement. CENTCOM announced the threat had been engaged. Bahrain's Ministry of Defense labeled it an act of aggression and reported that its air defenses, operating in tandem with American systems, intercepted the inbound projectile before impact. The Houthis claimed responsibility on Telegram before the smoke had cleared over Manama. 3 governments, 3 official statements, all confirming the same event from 3 different vantage points, each worded to project calm and reassert control, and not one of them addressed what actually changed today. What changed is not that the Houthis fired a missile. They have fired hundreds. What changed is the target. This was not a container ship transiting the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. It was not a guided missile destroyer maneuvering in the southern Red Sea with layered defenses and open water to absorb the threat. This was the physical building where the United States commands every naval operation between the Suez Canal and the Indian Ocean. Enjoying this analysis? Subscribe to Arsenal Economics for weekly deep dives into the geopolitical and financial forces shaping the world before the headlines catch up. ArsenalEconomics.com, NSA Bahrain, located at Jaffer in Manama, is home to U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, Combined Maritime Forces, and the Fifth Fleet. Approximately 9,000 American military personnel are stationed on a base that sits on an island nation smaller than New York City, roughly 200 kilometers across open water from the Iranian coastline. The Fifth Fleet's area of responsibility encompasses 2.5 million square miles of ocean, from the Suez Canal through the Red Sea, down through the Gulf of Aden, across the Arabian Sea, through the Strait of Hormuz, the full length of the Persian Gulf, and into the northwestern Indian Ocean. Every carrier strike group that enters the Gulf operates under Fifth Fleet Command Authority. Every destroyer running missile defense in the southern Red Sea reports to the command structure housed at Jaffer. The coalition task forces, maritime interdiction operations, and the intelligence fusion center that tracks every vessel transit through Hormuz. All of it is coordinated from that single base. That base sits on a total land area of 765 square kilometers, connected to Saudi Arabia by a single causeway. Bahrain is not a continent with strategic depth or dispersal options. It is a small island in a confined body of water where Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles can reach any point from launch positions on the Iranian shore. And as of today, Houthi ballistic missiles can reach it from 1,600 kilometers to the south. The Fifth Fleet headquarters is now inside a threat envelope from 2 directions simultaneously: Iran to the northeast, Yemen to the southwest. That convergence is new. It was not the operational reality 5 years ago, and it changes the defensive calculus for every planner inside that building in ways that are enormously expensive to resolve. The United States has conducted extensive airstrikes on Houthi positions in Yemen over the past year and a half. Hundreds of sorties. Tomahawk cruise missiles at roughly $2 million per round. JDAM guided bombs dropped from B-2 bombers that cost $150,000 per hour to operate. Strikes on radar sites, drone storage facilities, missile launch positions, and underground command nodes. The Pentagon's chosen word for all of this was degrading. CENTCOM used it repeatedly in official statements. Spokespeople told reporters on background that the strikes had significantly reduced the Houthis' ability to threaten maritime traffic and regional targets. Today, a Houthi ballistic missile traveled approximately 1,600 kilometers from Yemen to Bahrain and reached the airspace directly above the most strategically important American naval installation in the entire Middle East. Both of those facts cannot be true simultaneously. You cannot have significantly degraded an adversary's missile capability and then watch that same adversary execute the most ambitious long-range strike in its operational history against a target of higher strategic value than anything it has previously attempted. Either the degradation assessment was accurate at the time, and the Houthis reconstituted their capability faster than American intelligence anticipated, or the assessment was never accurate, and the strikes never accomplished what the American public was told they accomplished. Neither option is minor. Both represent a structural failure in how the United States communicates military outcomes to its own citizens. This is the part that no Pentagon press briefing is structured to explain, because the real strategy here is not built on military capability. It is built on cost. A Houthi ballistic missile, depending on the variant, costs somewhere between $20,000 and $200,000 to produce. The range is wide because the Houthis deploy everything from modified Scud derivatives to more modern solid fuel systems with Iranian design lineage. But even at the upper ceiling of that range, we are talking about a weapon that costs less than a single interceptor missile the United States fires to shoot it down. The real numbers. A Standard Missile-2, SM-2, one of the primary air defense interceptors aboard U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, costs approximately $2.1 million per round. The SM-6, the newer variant capable of engaging ballistic missile threats in their terminal phase, runs approximately $4.3 million. A Patriot PAC-3 interceptor costs around $4 million per unit. A THAAD interceptor sits between $12 and $15 million per shot. The attacker spends $200,000. The defender spends $4 million. That is a 20-to-1 cost exchange ratio in favor of the attacker on every single engagement. Every missile the Houthis launch, whether it reaches its target or gets intercepted or falls harmlessly into the sea, costs the United States between 10 and 20 times more to defeat than it costs Yemen to fire. That is not a military problem you can bomb your way out of. That is an economics problem. And it compounds over time. Houthi production costs stay roughly flat. Iranian components, Yemeni assembly, no precision manufacturing overhead. Meanwhile, America's interceptor inventory is finite, expensive to replace, and produced on manufacturing lines already stretched thin by stockpile demands for potential Taiwan contingencies and ongoing commitments to Ukraine. U.S. Navy destroyers operating in the Red Sea have collectively expended hundreds of interceptors against Houthi attacks over the past 18 months. A single Arleigh Burke carries approximately 90 to 96 missiles in its vertical launch cells. Ships have returned from deployment with magazines nearly empty, requiring months of rearming and maintenance before they can redeploy. At an average intercept cost of $2.5 million per engagement, the United States has spent well over $1 billion in missile expenditure alone, defending against weapons that collectively cost their producers less than the price of a mid-range American home. When a $50,000 missile can force a $4 million defensive response, you are not in a military confrontation. You are in a math problem, and the United States is on the wrong side of the equation. The Houthis did not begin this campaign by firing at American military installations. The escalation followed a deliberate sequence, and each step was climbed only after they concluded that the American response to the previous step was insufficient to deter the next. The first rung was commercial cargo ships, bulk carriers and container vessels transiting the Bab al-Mandeb. Slow targets, no escort, no point defense, no hardened structure. The second rung involved attacking commercial ships in proximity to U.S. and Allied naval escorts. This forced American warships to engage, expend interceptors, and shift from power projection to point defense. The merchant vessels remained the primary targets, but every engagement now directly involved American military assets and American military cost. The third rung was firing at the warships themselves, not the ships they were protecting, at the destroyers, the USS Carney, the USS Mason, the USS Gravely. American combatants engaged Houthi missiles and drones aimed directly at their hulls. This is where the confrontation crossed from commercial harassment into something that legally and operationally constitutes armed conflict against the United States military. The fourth rung was today, not a warship at sea with speed, maneuverability, electronic warfare suites, and a combat system engineered for exactly this threat, a fixed installation on land, in the capital of a sovereign allied nation, the headquarters of a numbered fleet, a target that cannot maneuver, cannot relocate, and cannot be concealed. Each rung represents a deliberate escalation in target value, political weight, and strategic signal. The American response to every prior rung, airstrikes on Yemen, failed to alter Houthi behavior. The Houthis absorbed that lesson completely, and today's missile is what acting on that lesson looks like. There is a fifth rung. The escalation ladder has an internal logic, and that logic does not terminate with today's attack. Today was a proof of concept. Range demonstrated, intent demonstrated, access to the airspace above America's most critical Gulf installation demonstrated. This missile did not arrive in a geopolitical vacuum. It arrived during the same window in which American and Iranian negotiators were exchanging proposals in Geneva through Omani intermediaries. The Wall Street Journal and the New York Times published the contours of those proposals in remarkable detail. 5 American demands: zero enrichment, permanent restrictions, physical dismantlement of nuclear sites, all enriched uranium transferred to American soil, and minimal sanctions relief. Iran's counterproposal, a 3 to 5 year suspension, followed by 1.5% enrichment in a regional consortium. The distance between those two positions is not a gap that more talks can bridge. It is a structural incompatibility. And into that incompatibility, a ballistic missile flew 1,600 kilometers from one of the poorest countries on Earth and reached the airspace above the command headquarters of the most powerful naval force in the region. The Houthis did not make this targeting decision on their own. They are serious fighters. They have survived a decade of war against a Saudi coalition backed by American intelligence and American munitions. But the decision to escalate from maritime targets to the command headquarters of a U.S.-numbered fleet is not a tactical call made by a militia commander in Sana'a. It is a strategic decision made by people who understand precisely what that risk purchases at a negotiating table. The missile was launched from Yemen. The crew was Houthi. The propellant was Yemeni. But the guidance technology, the targeting data, and the strategic timing, with 2 carrier strike groups in the Gulf, with American F-22s staged on Israeli runways during active Geneva negotiations, that timing was chosen by people who understand that a missile does not need to destroy its target to deliver its message. The message? We can reach you. Not at sea where your ships can maneuver, not in transit where escorts provide cover. At home, at the base where your admirals work and your operations center tracks every vessel in the Gulf. We can reach that place with a proxy weapon launched from a country you have been bombing for 18 months without result. And if we can reach it from Yemen, consider what we can reach from the Iranian coastline 30 miles away. The intended audience for that message is not the Fifth Fleet commander. It is the negotiating team that just returned from Geneva carrying 5 demands that Iran has no viable pathway to accepting. Bahrain signed a defense cooperation agreement with the United States in 1991. It hosted the Fifth Fleet from 1995. It was designated a major non-NATO ally in 2002. It normalized relations with Israel under the Abraham Accords in 2020. At every step, the underlying assumption was identical. Proximity to American military power provides security. Hosting the fleet makes the island safer. As of this morning, hosting the Fifth Fleet makes Bahrain a ballistic missile target. The asset that was supposed to guarantee Bahraini security has become the reason Bahraini families woke up to air raid warnings over their capital. Manama is a city. There are schools, hospitals, apartment towers, and shopping districts within the potential debris radius of an intercepted missile. The people who live there did not vote on whether their island should serve as the front line. In a U.S.-Iran confrontation they did not start and cannot influence. Every other Gulf state with American boots on its soil is now running the same calculation. Qatar with Al Udeid Air Base, Kuwait with Camp Arifjan, the UAE with Al Dhafra, Oman with its logistics agreements. Each one watching Bahrain and asking out loud, does hosting American forces make us safer? Or does it paint a target on our capital in a war between Washington and Tehran that we have no ability to control and no seat at the table to negotiate? The Pentagon will brief today's event as a successful intercept. The missile was engaged, no damage to the installation, no American casualties reported. That will be the headline. And as far as it goes, it is accurate. But a successful intercept is not the metric that determines whether this posture is sustainable. The metric that matters is whether the United States can simultaneously maintain continuous missile defense over a fixed base in Bahrain, provide carrier air defense in the Gulf, protect Red Sea shipping lanes, sustain Mediterranean presence, and maintain interceptor production rates sufficient for Western Pacific contingencies indefinitely against an adversary whose entire strategic model is engineered to make defense more expensive than attack. That equation does not balance. The Houthis fired the missile. Iran designed the strategy. And America is paying the bill. What flew over Bahrain today was not just a projectile. It was a cost curve, a strategic message, and a negotiating position, all traveling simultaneously at Mach 8. Every government between Cairo and Beijing received that message at exactly the same moment. The only question left is whether Washington understood what it actually said.